Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Anais.
I'm Gerald.
I'm Andy.
Okay, so, oh God. You guys have been really quiet in Slack, so I don't know if you like this story or not. I'm really excited, though I'm sad she glossed over the sex scene. Okay. So this week we read Mr. Salary by Sally Rooney. People have been saying how she's like the first real great literary voice of the millennial generation. I don't know if you guys agree with that, having read this.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to judge, but she's pretty good. Yeah, she's pretty good.
I definitely want to read something longer by her. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Andy, you're very quiet and very stiff.
Yes, that's correct.
Wow, did you hate this story?
Look, I had opinions on this story.
Great, that's what the show is. You're in luck. The show is for you to say your opinion.
Who knew? Dear Lord.
Okay. Let me just summarize it, and then we'll let Andy riff.
Tell us what the story's about.
Okay, so the story is about Sookie, who is, well, it's not actually about Sookie. It's about Nathan. It actually doesn't matter. There's a girl named Sookie. She is the narrator. She's 24. She is, I think, in grad school in Boston, and she's visiting home for Christmas in Dublin. She's Irish, and Nathan picks her up. Who is Nathan? Slowly you find out Nathan is this old man who she lives with. When her home situation wasn't great, she's in love with him, and he's kind of like slamming on the brakes, kind of ish. And she has a sort of a strange relationship with her father. She wasn't planning on coming home for Christmas, but her father has leukemia, really bad diagnosis. Also, his mind's starting to go. He doesn't always know what time of day it is or who he's with. She visits him in the hospital. She stays with Nathan. Throughout this, you realize she's hardcore in love with Nathan, and you kind of think like Nathan's in love with her, but he doesn't want to get with her, but then he does. She walks in the rain. She sees a sleeping bag in the river. Anything I'm missing? It's kind of like basically it's that moment where she has been obsessed over Nathan for a long time. He's been slamming on the brakes, but now finally he gives in by the end of it, and it's open-ended as to whether or not this will continue or be good for them. I think that's a good summary.
And she, I don't think she was Irish. I think she said she lived in the Midlands. We lived in the Midlands.
Oh, okay.
So English, but you know.
So she's English. Oh, is that why he makes that joke that when he's with her, his accent goes away or something? Yes. Like he tries to speak differently. That must be what that's about. I thought it was because she was coming in from Boston, so she had lost her accent.
No,
over in Boston.
I think it's that.
I think it's that. Okay, so she's from the Midlands. And okay, so and I guess it's kind of important because of Gerald's question that we'll get into. He makes a lot more money than her, and he has paid for her life. All right. Yeah. Cool. So, Andy, what did you think of the story?
So there's a lot of things going on in this story. Mm-hmm. So at first there's the dialogue is weird, and that took some getting used to how it was broken up. But then I was like, oh, that I'm into this because I have to really try and figure out whose opinions and emotions these are. Are these her opinions? Are these his opinions? And that plays into the whole theme. So I was like, okay, I'm good. That took me a minute. Mm-hmm. And then when she's talking about how much she's learning about leukemia, there's a line. It says, in chronic leukemia, these cells can mature partly but not completely, the website said. These cells may look fairly normal, but they are not. And I thought, I'm clever. And by reading closely, I've learned something about the story. That's going to be the key to the story. Aren't I wise and a good reader?
Yeah.
And then at the end of the story, she repeats the line, these cells may look fairly normal, but they are not. It's like Sally Rooney telling me I'm stupid.
She's telling you you're right. What do you mean? She just told you you're right.
No.
Yeah.
She's rubbing my nose in it. She's like, oh, you thought you were clever? Yeah, that is the central theme.
Oh, come on. Ooh, I don't think that's beating someone over the head. That is not beating over the head. That's a nice little callback. She's
Yeah.
I don't know.
And the first reference was almost exactly halfway through the story. Just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And she said before the second occasion when she says it, she says, I think, because Nathan says, I think when you get back to Boston, we'll have more perspective. And she says, I'm not going back to Boston. I didn't say. And then she says the thing about the cells. So I don't know. I think it's really good. I think it's very clever.
Yeah. Okay, so
I enjoyed
Gerald,
reading it.
So what are you mad about? What are you mad about, Andy?
Yeah.
I'm mad that my clever insight amounted to nothing.
What do you mean it amounted to? All right, okay. We'll let you get into your clever insight, because just saying, "Oh, I know that this metaphor is pertinent to the story," doesn't mean you've actually explained the metaphor. So we'll get into that. So Gerald, so you like the story?
Yep.
Okay. Anything to expand on that before we get into more particular questions?
Expand on it. No, because we're going to cover it in the other questions. So it's one of these that the second and subsequent read-throughs you enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I enjoyed it on my first read-through, but I definitely felt like I got a lot more out of it the second time. So it starts with Nathan picking up Sookie at the airport, and immediately I at least was like, I don't know what's happening right now. I don't know who these people are to each other. She clearly is like really into him, but he's acting kind of like an older brother a little bit, sort of like he immediately teases her. But then he's a little too into her by the time they're in the car. And it's like, oh, the brother thing's not working anymore. Okay. So how did you guys react? Gerald, how did you react to that airport scene? Who did you think they were to each other?
Yeah, like you, I thought brother and sister, because it started off, she's obviously not very well off. He is very well off. There's some nice little bits, and when they get into the car, it says he puts keys in the ignition, the dash lit up in soft Scandinavian colours, which I thought was a great way of saying this is a modern car, this is a newish car, this is an expensive car. And yeah, the bit about the aftershave. So she in drugstores, she takes the lid off that his aftershave that she finds, and if she's having a hard time, and you think, yeah, okay. So you sort of think, okay, it's not brother and sister unless it's one of those stories. And so I just stopped trying to guess then, and when you talk about the girlfriend that he doesn't have, then you think, okay, this is something a bit deeper.
Yeah. And also the very first paragraph, it says that she brushed her teeth in the airport. That was a move you only do when you want to make out with the dude picking you up. So
is that right?
It's like, I know that move. Anyway. Andy, what did you think they were to each other?
Yeah, same principle. She was definitely way more into him than he was to her. I thought maybe she was his girlfriend on the side, his secret girlfriend, and he was picking her up for a liaison. And then like they dropped the wife thing, and I was like, ha ha. And then it was a joke.
Right. At one point I thought they were exes and she wasn't over her ex yet. And he was like, we're not doing that again, but we can still be friends. I thought it was one of those weird, like, exes who stay friends kind of stories. But no, that's not quite it either. So
no. It is a strange relationship, and it's consistent all the way through that he's very reluctant and hesitant and not really going to do it, and she's desperate. She's desperate to be something other than friends.
She talks about the well, let before we get into that, let's define. So in plain language, what are they to each other? How would you define it, Andy? Or how would you explain it?
I mean, in plain language, I think when he calls her his niece, that's probably she's like his sister-in-law's.
No, it's his sister's It's his brother-in-law's niece.
His brother-in-law's niece. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
His sister's niece by marriage. Okay, which first of all, let me just tell you, the way that they met was such a culture shock to me. Oh, here's a 19-year-old girl whose home situation isn't great. So her family's trying to figure out who she can live with. 34-year-old bachelor seems fine. In a Latino family, that would never happen. Like, that is not, I'm like, I think in many families that would never happen. Like, it's like,
no.
What?
No,
yeah.
And especially sort of young, an unmarried guy. I don't, it's so strange. It's not something I would have ever come across either.
Andy, did you find that weird? As weird as Gerald?
Oh yeah, it was super weird.
Like, who thought this was a good idea? You're sending this 19-year-old.
But maybe it's an Irish thing. Maybe there's more of a family, and if she was poor, she couldn't afford to rent a place. So
there's no way it's an Irish thing, because the Irish are famously Catholic, and I don't think
I never knew that.
Yeah, like I don't think they're going to be like, yes, 19-year-olds go live with this bachelor man unwedded. But I think it might be a class thing. I think you're onto that. It might be class. Few options, and when there's few options, then an option seems the only way forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically she's 19. She doesn't really have a good place to live. Her mother, who died shortly after she was born, her family, who doesn't take her in, maybe they can't for class reasons, finds this guy who she's kind of like loosely related to. Like, it's so loose that he was at her christening, but that was kind of it. And so she moves in with him when she's 19, and she quickly falls in love with him, and he's slamming on the brakes as much as possible. And the only time, so she was when she's 19, the first time and only time that they kiss in the history before the story is when she's 22. It was 2 years before the story.
And I think part of his reluctance is the fact that he does remember her as a small child, and has seen her growing up when he is more mature and an adult. So I think there's a sort of constant viewing by him that she is that much younger, and she is still a child, even when she now becomes an adult in this story. I think he still views her as someone who is childlike in relation to him.
I mean, 19 and 34 for sure, even without having seen her as a baby. And I think also he's cognizant of the power structure. He's paying for her life. He is a lot wealthier than her, older than her, secure. And she's sort of, I mean, so Gerald and Slack asked a really interesting question, which is that Sally Rooney is known as like a Marxist writer. She is a self-described communist, and that it comes through in her writing. And did it come through in this story? And I think one of the ways it did was, I mean, his name is Mr. Salary. So in the Communist Manifesto, it says that basically the bourgeoisie marriage is the wife is a means of production who is exploited by the husband. Like in rich societies, it's very much it's like a private form of prostitution. And that in a communist society, you wouldn't have public or private prostitution. That marriage is a purely sort of romantic thing. As I was double checking what it said, doing research for the story, I found out that he's like a super romantic. He married his childhood sweetheart. There's all these love letters, and they stayed married until the day they died. I'm like, this is so cute. But like, he's like a hardcore romantic, but he does think that like the patriarchy and capitalism makes wives a means of production to be exploited by the men who marry them. So then even though these people aren't married, they're living together. If there's this sense of, because he provides, therefore the expectation is that she should have sex. And that story that's in this story. Her friends all assume that because he's spending all this money on her, obviously they must be having sex. And my first read through, I didn't even like think to myself, why is that? Because I'm coming at this with my capitalist brain in a capitalist society. So I'm like, of course, that is a very natural assumption, but there's no reason why it should be, right? And I think the fact that he's resisting that And he just makes a joke about it, like, I'm not getting my money's worth. You don't even do the laundry. He doesn't take it to the sex thing. He takes it to laundry, right? So there's a way in which his view of this is he doesn't want that part to be transactional. And the whole communist thing is that human relationships and bodies should not be commoditized. That's a capitalist thing, not a communist thing. So that's the only way where I see that coming through. I don't know if she's like writing this as a story that's about how relationships should be in communism. I think that's just her belief system. So we're seeing it coming across in her story.
Yeah, and I did wonder, because whenever it comes across, she mentions his, how he became rich, because he was working for a company that was bought out by Google, and they have this sort of airy fairy app thing, and it's made him rich. But whenever Sally Rooney talks about the money, it's like it's nothing. So I wonder if she's trying to build up in the reader a dislike of Sookie because she just takes money all the time. She doesn't understand. It's like she's unappreciative because they go shopping and she drops little things in. So we went for lunch on Suffolk Street, and I put all our luxurious paper gift bags under the table. He let me order sparkling wine and the most expensive main course they had. So there's no apology for this. There's no sort of hesitation in her character's actions. But
do you think that Sally Rooney trying to make you dislike her, or is she saying there's no reason why she needs to apologize? The fact that that anyone might even think that she should be offering an excuse for this, if she's not sleeping with the guy and they're just friends, then she should be like, oh, I'll get you back. Or when I'm in a more stable position, that we're expecting that excuse is the capitalist reaction, right? That we would expect her to either be, you better be his partner, or if not, then you better, if you accept this, it should be with a lot of humility and gratitude and constantly self-flagellation, which she does not do. And I think that expectation is capitalist, is what Sally Rooney would say, putting on my Sally Rooney hat, putting on my, okay. Like, I think that would be the reaction. Like the fact that she doesn't, constantly view it that way is, I think, a little indicative of the way that Sally Rooney sees money. She describes the salary that Mr. Salary makes as hilarious. Yeah, that's really fun. A hilarious salary. Like after Google bought them out, whoa, they made stupid money, funny, stupid money. And don't forget that when later in the story, Sookie says to Mr. Salary, she wants him to sleep with him. She wants him to sleep with her, and he's refusing. She goes, "Come on, it's just a simple favor." And he goes, "No, the simple favor is paying for your flight here." Like he doesn't want to make that transaction. Like he's like, "No, the favor is paying for your flight. It's not sex." I thought that was great.
Yeah, and it's like, the simple favor is buying the flight, and he never makes a thing out of all the purchases. So if for him it's, maybe it doesn't mean very much. Maybe it's not important to him.
It probably doesn't. That's my sense. Andy, would you like to chime in?
Well, no, I mean, that's where his money comes from, is a ridiculous chain of events that leads to magic money fairy dropping bags of money on him.
Right. Yeah, because exactly. She doesn't even take too much. It's funny because she doesn't take too much interest in exactly what it is that he does, but she takes a lot of interest in like his work life dramas. And she like picks factions in the Office soap opera. So yeah.
And she also writes early on. She writes about Nathan. He was 34 and had a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment where he lived alone with a granite-topped kitchen island. I thought that was a really. I just drop this sort of rich lifestyle in.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I'm glad we got that out of the way, because it was I think it is very present, and I missed it on my first read through. And once you know that about Sally Rooney, you're like, I can kind of see why there was that need to have the friends assume some sort of, what Marx would call private prostitution.
Wow.
Yeah, he was against it because it was an exploitation of human bodies. What did he call it? Hold on. I just looked it up because you asked that question. It was he didn't call it this, but like people reading him were like the sex work reduces women's bodies to a sex producing machine to be operated and exploited by men. So
Wow.
that's what's coming through. Cool. Okay. So we've established what their relationship is like. So let's jump over now to Sookie and her father. She's coming back in part because he's dying of leukemia. So what does his illness, Andy, reveal about their relationship or that visit that they have in the hospital?
What does it reveal about their relationship?
Yeah, I don't know if there was anything. On my second read through, I was like, wait a minute. I don't know if
Well,
we
see,
had anything. Mm-hmm.
I only read through it the one time because Sally Rooney made fun of me.
She
So-
didn't make fun of you. You're a
She was making
sensitive
fun of
boy. You're being a sensitive. She didn't.
I don't know. I think Sally Rooney's very smart, and she wanted to rub in my face how much smarter she was, and she did. Good job, Sally Rooney. No, that was a weird visit, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was all disconnected until he started making fun of Mr. Salary and why he would never be with her.
But isn't there something great? Do you remember that she says, when he says he'll never marry you, she goes, oh, clearly he's not talking. He doesn't realize I'm in the room. And then she relaxes. And it's like, really?
Yes.
Is that really what's happening?
Yeah, that was funny, wasn't it? It's because we get it.
Right.
We know what he's talking about, but she just totally ignored it.
Yeah. So the line, it's so she's nervous at first, but he's like, you're a cool customer, aren't you? She's like, oh my God, he's gonna start like criticizing me and speaking his truth about how he views me. And then all of a sudden he says that whole thing about he's never gonna marry you, he'll marry someone else. And the next line is, it was clear that Frank, that's the father, that Frank didn't know who I was. I'm like, is it clear?
In his most lucid moment.
Yeah. Yeah. But one of the things about the relationship that I think stood out to me was she's like, we're a little estranged. I've toyed with the idea of calling him abusive, but not really, because I never lived in terror of him. But as soon as she finds out about the diagnosis, she obsessively reads all these texts about it in medical texts. Like, she does care. She visits. It's a short visit, shorter than necessary, but it's like there's this weird back and forth. Like, it's still her father, and that's coming across very clearly in a way that doesn't have to be overly explained. And it's interesting. Like, it does. Because what does he say? He ends up saying, you're a decent girl, right? At the end, that truce. Like, there is some kind of affection in there. It's just he's an addict, right? He was addicted to some prescription drug, probably a painkiller, I'm not sure. And he wasn't always there. But
he says, you're a decent girl, whatever they might say, which is a bit sort of, people have been talking. But I wonder whether, because of what happens later on, right at the end, I wonder whether Sookie coming back to Ireland was to see her father was just a pretext in order to get, because it seems that maybe she is now got leukemia as well, so that sorry, spoiler alert, that she now wants to get back with Nathan, so using coming to see her father on a pretext to stay with Nathan. I wondered. Yeah,
but I mean, that option to try to come back and do this could have happened whenever. I do think that the reason why it's happening now, I mean, Nathan picks up the phone at 4 a.m. when she calls and like sits there in silence as she like, guys, this is an explicit show today, just so you know. So I'm going to say, like, she's just like masturbating on the phone and he's just there in silence at 4 a.m. Like, they basically are already some version of a couple. It could have been Christmas. It could have been the summer. It could have been whenever. I think the now is because of her father's leukemia. And part, of course she wants to see Nathan, but like, this could have happened whenever. They talk all the time. Yeah.
Funny.
Wait, but Gerald, do you think she gets leukemia by the end of it?
That's what I read into the ending. Yeah.
Oh, that's not what I read into it. Andy, is that what you read into it?
That is not what I read into it.
Oh, okay.
Me neither. What did you read into it, Andy?
Well, I just thought that she was still trapped in some weird version of her adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looked like she was a grown-up, but she'd been perpetually stunted.
I mean, this is kind of classic daddy issues, isn't it? The guy who like provides the roof over her head, gives her the emotional and financial support, and is there for her. She even says, she calls it the daughter to girlfriend or girlfriend to daughter spectrum, as she always knows where she is. So like she knows she started more as a daughter, but she's like charting her way over to girlfriend. It was very creepy, like, but also very accurate, because that's kind of what's happening here. It's not her biological father or even adoptive father, really. She's coming in at 19. But so he's not a father at all, but he is playing a role that Frank never did initially. And now she's like, and it's gotten weird, Electra complexy.
I forgot about that spectrum, and that is a creepy spectrum.
But pretty accurate. My note is just girlfriend to daughter spectrum and a bunch of exclamation points.
Yeah, to consider that you're on that spectrum is sort of a bit weird, I will admit. It's
disturbing. Yeah.
It's
very disturbing. But like Andy, I thought that ending, which was these cells may look fairly normal, but they are not, is just an admission that there's an immaturity to her, and she's like simultaneously acknowledging it while also giving into it, which is part of the immaturity itself. And I wonder if that's why Nathan decides to do it now, is he sees her finally kind of growing up, and he's always wanted her. Like, how you were saying, it seems like people do talk, because she says, I just want to know that you love me, or that you do love me. And he goes, infamously. Okay. I love the dialogue, because it has that, like, how like there's some authors whose characters all speak in a very particular way, and then it's like, oh, it's like a character from like a Philip Roth novel or a character from a Vonnegut novel. She has that thing where you're like, this is a character from a Sally Rooney story, like, where it doesn't actually sound like people you really know, but it's believable for the character that she drew.
Yeah. No, I like Nathan. He seems a pretty sort of laid back kind of guy. He's good.
Okay, can we do and do you have anything to add?
Well, I mean, what do you guys think about this sleeping bag?
Oh yeah. Bag. What do you think about the sleeping bag, Andy?
I don't know. I just assumed it was a metaphor for her dad dying while she wasn't paying attention.
I didn't get that. It was one of 3 sections. Where did I write this down so I don't forget all 3 sections? Where it was one of 3 sections where there is a reference to death and then life continuing immediately after. Okay, so it's these moments where people are briefly, I'm just gonna have my note right here, so I'm like talking to my microphone. Yeah. People are briefly absorbed with death, are gathered near death, then animate with life. So first is when she's in the hospital, and she's like, it's like the bright linoleum floor, and people are chatting as if there is a sickness and death all around them, but maybe at some point it's just life again. And that happens again with the sleeping bag. Everyone's drawn to the spectacle that they think is death, and then it's just a sleeping bag, and immediately the guy's back on the phone. His wife's like, tell him about the time, like, like back into their lives. And then the last one was while she's at the bridge after the sleeping bag, she starts thinking about death a lot. Remember, there's a moment where she, even though it's pouring rain, she has her elbows on the railing and she's sort of just thinking. And then she, despite that heaviness, she's like, why do we think that death is more of a spectacle than life? Goes right back into her life, goes back on the couch, and is back to like, please have sex with me. There's like that transition that happens 3 times. And I don't know what to make of that. I just noted it, that there's this like, kind of like a life goes on kind of thing.
Yeah, because I did wonder at the start whether she was walking back and whether it was Nathan driving back who'd had an accident and ended up in the river. But obviously it wasn't. And I wondered whether it was more to do that there was so seemingly everyone was watching, and what was the piece of fabric, and was it somebody's clothing, and then it's only a sleeping bag. No one asks, what is a sleeping bag doing in the river? Why is, and I thought it might have been a commentary on the fact that people live on the streets and sleep on the streets, and no one cares because there's somebody sleeping back in the river, but it's of no interest to the people on the phone.
That's funny because growing up urban, living urban, a random sleeping bag in the river, it's like there's 1,000 different ways it could have gotten there, and it isn't always necessarily homelessness. It's just a lot of people living in one space. It could literally be like just rolled out of someone's car, like, and then just tumbled in the wind.
Okay.
It didn't strike me that there's a sleeping bag in the river because I feel like weirder stuff comes out of the Hudson. It's like, that's just kind of urban living. You're just gonna find random stuff in random places. A lot of people. But I kind of like what you're saying, Gerald, anyway, because it's not really supported anywhere else, but it is the way in which people are drawn to spectacle, whatever that spectacle may be, and then move on immediately when the spectacle doesn't deliver. And like you, I briefly worried it was going to be Nathan.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Kind of funny.
Can we do some shameless soap opera like discussion of, so are they going to make it, Nathan and Sookie? Do you think they're going to be happily ever after, Andy?
I mean, it depends.
That's cop out.
Good answer, right?
No. Yeah, what do you think?
Technically correct.
Give me your hot take.
Probably they'll be fine. I mean, she'll be obsessed with him forever and it'll be creepy, but he seems really into her. And the dad said they wouldn't make it, but he's an idiot. So, screw that guy.
Screw that guy.
Okay. Gerald, do you think they're going to make it or not?
Yeah, I think so, because the fact that he's never really had a girlfriend, although he did sleep with women at times when she was living with him, but he always sort of did it not quietly, because she was listening to them through the wall, but it was almost apologetically, and there's also the creepy bit where she looks at them in the morning to see if they look like her or something. That's a bit strange. But I think so. I think because she will, she's becoming an adult. She's officially an adult now. So I think that age difference will mean less, and they will be just treated as two people. It's only 15 years, so as they get older, then the effect will become less.
Yeah, I'm a little less optimistic. I think it's completely possible to figure out and make it work, but I think the biggest hurdle is going to be, it's been 5 years of the magic of feeling someone wants you really intensely and this crush is super intense. And now all of a sudden, once that bubble is burst and it's no longer the idea of someone, but it's now someone who you might be moving in with, who you see every day, all their patterns, all their tics, pet peeves are revealed and also triggered. As that happens, I wonder if they'll actually continue to like each other. Like I don't know how much of this liking each other comes from this ideal, that comes from this like mutual crush that's magical, and then you're getting rid of that magic now. It doesn't mean it's not going to work, but you put a lot of this for years,
Look, Phoebe Cates married Kevin Kline in 1989, and they're still together.
I don't know who those people are.
I've heard of Kevin Kline, but not
Phoebe Cates from Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh yeah, I don't.
In the red bikini.
Well,
that's famous. What were you doing in the 80s, Anais?
I was unborn for most of it, and then I was born for the last 2 years of it.
Come on, Andy.
Okay, so
she was like 19 when they got married, and Kevin Kline's an old man.
Okay, well, it happens. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I agree with Gerald that a 15-year age difference when two people are actual adults isn't a huge deal, but a 19-year-old and a 34-year-old is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what did you guys? We've already talked a lot about Sally Rooney, but what about her storytelling style and her writing style? What did you guys think of that? We can start with Gerald.
I liked it. There were so many lovely little bits. But what is this thing about quotation marks? Why do they? It's I don't know. I find that a bit annoying. And yes, it doesn't generally trip me up, but actually, I like to see visually. I like to see. Oh, here's a bit of dialogue coming up, rather than so I can get my dialogue interpretation head on, rather than just being a load of text. So I wish they wouldn't do that. But I liked. There's something funny about, because she talks about she says one of the best stories she's ever read was Hemingway's White Elephants, Hills Like White Elephants. So I think she's looked at the Hemingway style, and so she has the same sort of sparseness, which I enjoyed. So I very much liked how she wrote.
And it makes a lot of sense because so we read Hills Like White Elephants on this podcast, and that is almost, I would say it's like 80-90% dialogue, and the dialogue is so tense and so good. And I can see that inspiration in this story as well. Yeah. I don't know if you remember, Gerald, but that's the one where they're talking about abortion but never say the word abortion. The couple at the train station.
Yeah.
So Andy, what did you think of her writing style?
Well, so much like Gerald, the lack of quotation marks irritated me, but I felt it was thematically appropriate in this story. So I was willing to wrestle with that. And then it let her do the clever little trick at the end with the "I'm not going back to Boston, I didn't say."
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of stuff to wade through to get to that one line, though. But, yeah.
Well, but she has so many good lines. I asked this question about writing style just so I can read this line on air. That's all that was for. So when she says, she's talking about Frank and Nathan, and she says, they hated each other, and I mediated their mutual hatred in a way that made me feel successfully feminine. I love that line. Especially because that is usually the feminine part of feminine work, is that mediation that happens between other people, right? And there's sometimes even like and the ability to do it well is considered wily. You know?
Yeah, and I think I read the bit out earlier where he was 34 and had a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment where he lived alone with a grand kitchen island. And there was another little bit just afterwards. It was talking about Nathan's mother had been treated for breast cancer. And the line was, she was healthy now and played a lot of golf. It's just that, I don't know, it's a really nice way of writing. It's I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Andy, look, you want to say something?
No, I don't.
Okay. Another thing I was super impressed at, just from like, how do you do this from a writer's perspective, is when she's talking about animals that inappropriately imprint on the wrong thing, right? And Nathan goes, maybe I shouldn't have come to your christening. What a great joke. But to set up that joke, she has to randomly insert this whole like, oh, I sent him articles about animals imprinting on the wrong thing, which is like, how did you get there? Like, how did you even think of this? And she did it so quickly. It's not like we had this long detour into like animals imprinting on the wrong thing. It was so quick and effective, and it paid off with that great joke. And that great joke also reestablished that Nathan keeps trying to like be like, whoa, hold your horses on this whole wanting to bone me thing, right? Like he's still putting that distance in this like funny way because he never wants to be unkind. Just tying all of that and like delivering that, I was just like, Sally Rooney, how? You are an expert. This is like, I just watched someone do like, I don't know, some crazy like gymnastic feat. Anyway.
Yeah. I think when someone, I don't know if the accolades are justified or not, but certainly she has a great way of writing and really a really sort of natural style that doesn't get in the way at all. Apart from those damn quotation marks. I should have put that in there.
That's such a modern thing now, is like dispensing with the quotation marks, that like, it's right. It's like everywhere now, to the point that I no longer get mad at it. I'm not going to win. So
Okay, yeah.
the adjustment has to come from me. I'm not going to.
It's like me arguing against Brexit. There's no point. It's quite interesting. Just as a side note, there was I was listening to a program about the no longer Man Booker Prize, and one of the shortlisted things. I think it's this one. It's 1,000 pages, and it's all one sentence.
I saw that. Yeah, we're not doing the book club. I'm sorry, Gerald. I know you want to.
What? No, you don't. You dare! Don't you dare! No. It's what? This experimental writing. It just no.
I mean, experimental writing's been around forever. Like the idea of someone I mean, well, not forever, but it's been around for a long, long, long time. This isn't like a uniquely 21st century thing, but I think because of social media, it gets a bigger, you know what I'm saying? Like someone did this one gimmicky thing. It may or may not be a gimmick. I'm being harsh, but now everyone knows about it. Where before it was sort of contained to like literary circles. And now it's like in a tweet that gets tweeted around. So it feels like it's everywhere now, but it's always been around.
Yeah. Well, I don't like it. So there.
All right. Do we want to say anything else, or do we want to rate?
I have an important question.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are our ratings based on? Is it how good the story was, or how we feel about the story?
Typically, it's how we feel about the story.
Good.
Oh my God, Andy. All right. Yes, it's about how you feel about the story. And this is really to protect you from incorrectly giving a low score and getting yelled at. It's a cop-out where you can say, it's just my feelings, guys. So,
well, we one of the first things we said very, very early on is that it's okay to not like a story. And it's sort of, it's also, everything's subjective. So every sort of analysis of anything artistic is very subjective. So you can't say that any one person is right or wrong. So yeah, it's how you feel about it, what you think of it individually.
Yeah. So we rate from 1 to 6 because we're special and weird. I'll just go first to get out of the way. I'm giving it a 5.5.
That's pretty high.
Yeah. Why don't we go to Andy next, just to comment on the low end?
I'm gonna give it a 4.
Okay, not as low as
because it was very good, but Sally Rooney was mean to me, and she hurt my feelings, and I don't want to read it again.
Okay.
Please write to her with these complaints so she can ignore.
I will let her know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anais's 5.5 was pretty high, but not high enough. It's a 6 from me.
Wow.
I loved it.
Awesome.
Really. Yeah. It's staying with me too. There's a lot of things that are staying and yeah, loved it. Really did like it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's no game this week because like listeners are always sending in stories and then we compete for them and then we never get to the story because we'll lose and then we'll forget to resubmit it. And that's just not fair to our listeners. So Mark, who wrote us a lovely letter, suggested 3 stories. And I went with Soul Solution by Eric Frank Russell. And listeners, if you have stories you want us to discuss, please submit it. There is a voice message clicky thing on our website, a widget, that's what it's called, on the right hand side on our landing page. If you go there and you leave a voice message, I can edit it into the show so then you hear yourself on the show, and that's awesome. Ooh. Or send it via text, that's fine.
Special guest.
Yes. So we are reading Soul Solution by Eric Frank Russell. I'm going to share a YouTube link that has the text and someone reading it. 2 in 1.
Ooh.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm excited. Also, I think he's primarily a sci-fi writer, so.
Okay.
Oh, good.
We shall see.
All right.
Okay.
So before you go, refute my. Oh, I didn't do the outro. This is the one from last week. I do this all the time. Yes. Okay. So, but before you go to our comment section and tell us who you were obsessed with as a 19-year-old, as much details as possible. And the older they are, the better. You can tell us at our Facebook group, the Literary Roadhouse Readers, or on Twitter at Lit Roadhouse, or our website, literaryroadhouse.com. If you want to read longer stories, possibly by Sally Rooney, I'm going to work it into our next set of 6. Definitely join the Literary Roadhouse Book Club, where we discuss a novel each month. And lastly, we're more of a Sookie than a Nathan on this podcast. So our podcast expenses are covered by generous listeners like you. Go to patreon.com/Literary Roadhouse. Every bit helps. And as always, I don't know who you should share this with. Who should they share it with? And as always, share this with the people who assume that you are trading money and sex. Okay. Until next time, read a good story.
Very good. Assume you're trading money.